The Acolytes finally come to an end. It stuck the landing. The story was cohesive and put together really well. All the plot holes were filled later on, and the story was honestly phenomenal.
Just kidding.
The story was absolutely horrible. The acting was atrocious, and the plot holes were so big, and they were never filled later on. Half the time, the story didn't make sense. The characters would change their motives on a dime. Random things were happening that never were explained, and it just honestly didn't make sense. With a $180 million budget, you would think each character would have decent character development, but not one character in this whole show had any character development. And it makes you think, where did the $180 million go? Hey bro, my name's Aaron, and welcome back to the Critic Sensei YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to dissect the writing from The Acolyte, because it was the worst writing I've ever seen, but it's the lowest rated, lowest viewed Star Wars project ever. Lower than The Rise of Skywalker, lower than The Book of Boba Fett, and lower than Andor, which was a great show, but the viewership was just very low. Before we get started, the budget for The Acolyte was $180 million. So that's an average of around $22 million per episode, and they had 8 episodes, around 8 hours, to make a cohesive story to make sense. And even with a $180 million budget, they couldn't put a story together, and the writing was absolutely horrible. So Leslie Headland promised to make a story that was completely separate from the Skywalker saga. But this show ended up being a colossal waste of potential, considering they were talking about the dark side, so talking about getting a whole different perspective, but honestly, they were trying to repeat a bunch of stuff from the previous Star Wars films and TV shows, trying to incorporate that into The Acolyte. Writing here is on another level of bad. Remember from The Rise of Skywalker, when the whole Palpatine line, Palpatine has returned. We thought that was going to be the worst line ever in Star Wars, but The Acolyte has so many things, so many poor writing, that really makes The Rise of Skywalker look like an absolute masterpiece. I've been talking about the writing in this show in my previous couple videos, but episode 7 of The Acolyte was definitely the low point of the show. And the 8th episode, the finale, tried to salvage things by having cameos by Darth Plagueis and Yoda, which honestly definitely made it much worse, because you can tell they were trying to save the show, try to get a season 2, and it honestly, like I said, made things so much worse. Let's break down where The Acolyte went wrong and why it's the worst Star Wars project to ever be created. So before we get started, I want to thank all of you for watching this video. If you like this style of video and this is a new channel, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It does mean a lot to me. At least the writing was consistent throughout the show. It was consistently bad. Characters were constantly flip-flopping their motives. All of a sudden they're the protagonist and the antagonist and the protagonist going back and forth without any motive whatsoever. The plot holes were abundant. Every episode there was something new that we think that's going to get explained later on, but never does. And the whole story structure was a complete mess. Let's take Osha for example. She gets the ability out of nowhere to see into the future. She can see that Sol is going to be killed by, she thinks, May, but it's actually her. And think about this for a sec. She thinks May is about to kill Sol, but the clothes she's wearing is what she's wearing at that moment. It just doesn't make sense, and these characters get these powers out of nowhere to get the story going, and because of the script. So having a power like seeing in the future would have came in handy so many times throughout this show, but it's never explained how she can do this. It doesn't come up again at all in the show. The writers were adding all these different plot devices to get the show going, and it shows how desperate they were to kind of get to the next thing. They weren't short on money. They had a $180 million budget on the show, so I don't understand why they were in such a rush to get to the next thing, get the story going. It's not a movie. With a TV show, you could get some character development, and you can actually build it throughout each episode. It's not like a movie where it's really crammed in. But even with 8 full episodes, they were unable to get any character development. And a $180 million budget, they didn't have one character that had good writing. There's also very inconsistent character development in the show. There's Osha with her sidekick, the Sith. Let's call him Premium Ezra Miller. They embark on a journey that feels forced and disjointed. Also in episode 8, Darth Plagueis and Yoda make cameos in the show that don't add anything to the story at all, especially Darth Plagueis. They show him creeping out of a cave, and it doesn't really add anything to the story. But I think they added that in to try to grab viewers at the last minute to try to get a season 2, but I think it was a huge mistake. Adding cameos like that, these huge characters in this show that have never been in live action, like Darth Plagueis, adding them in this show at that timing in that way was not the way to go. It's like the writers were throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick. And honestly, nothing really worked. Like I said, the story was horrible, the acting was so bad, and the plot holes were horrible, and adding these cameos in the show just made it so much worse. One of the bigger glaring issues of the show is when Soul captured May and she was strapped down to the table and she escapes. Honestly, it doesn't make sense how she escaped. So listen to this. May is strapped down to this table, and she has Pip the droid. But keep in mind, Pip is not May's droid. Pip is Osha's droid. So somehow she knows that Pip, the head can come off, and it has a key to unlock her cuffs. And not just that, when she escapes from her cuffs, Pip also turns into a taser, which tases Soul. But not just that, Soul is a Jedi Master. Jedis can block things, they have good intuition. It doesn't make any sense. You would think she's trying to tase him and he would grab her arm or do something, but instead he just takes it, he drops down. She goes to the escape pod, which happens to be right open right there, and somehow she's able to fly that out. And as this is happening, Soul is knocked out for 3 seconds, gets up, tries to get her, and it seems like Soul is trying to run to the ship for 10 minutes, but he's a Jedi Master. Why doesn't he use the Force to stop her? Why doesn't he do anything to stop her? Instead, she escapes, and he chases her in the ship through these asteroid field. The whole ship is going through this asteroid field. He shouldn't make it through. And on top of that, he could have just flown right above it, because you can tell he drove into this asteroid field trying to chase May, and instead of just staying above following her, a lot of it doesn't make sense. And this is the worst part about this whole situation. Remember the tracker, the gopher or the beaver character? For some reason, he's with Master Soul chasing May in his ship. And out of nowhere, the beaver starts sabotaging Soul's ship, destroying wires and so on, and lets May escape. Why did the gopher sabotage Soul's ship? Why did the gopher betray Soul? It doesn't make sense, and they don't explain why he does this. It just happened to be part of the script. This is lazy writing at its finest. And the gopher and Pip the droid are plot devices to get the plot going. And it happens so often through every episode, it gets to the point where you think this is a Star Wars parody, not some huge show that has a $180 million budget. Let's get to the climax of the show, and you have two fights going on at once. Osha and May are fighting each other, and you have the Sith and you have Master Soul fighting. So let's start off with the absolute worst fight I've seen in Star Wars ever, Osha and May. They're fighting, they're doing some kung fu stuff, but the thing is, it looks like they're going in slow motion. Very slow, maybe she's not too athletic, but with a $180 million budget, get some stunt doubles in there. Make it so you could actually make a good fight with lightsabers and so on. Instead, they're doing kung fu really slow, really poor fight, and it was not exciting whatsoever. And a lot of that might be her acting with, she doesn't have many facial expressions, and she's playing two characters, but she plays them exactly the same. That could be a big part of it. But in contrast, the fight between the Sith and Master Soul was actually not too bad. That was probably the best part about this whole series. They had a decent fight, it was fast-paced, but it doesn't make up for the poor storytelling and poor character development of the series. And you gotta think about this as well. Even though Soul, the actor, is a lot older than Amanda Steinberg, he's so much faster, so much more agile. And Amanda Steinberg's so slow and sluggish. He's half his age. And I feel like that shouldn't be right. They should have made the main fight between Osha and May a lot more intense, a lot more at stake. At the end of episode 8, towards the end of the fighting, Osha decides to switch to the dark side because May tells Osha that Master Soul killed their mother. But think back to episode 3. The only reason that Master Soul killed the mom was because the mom turned into a smoke demon. And as this was happening, one of the sisters, Soul didn't know who it was at the time, was also deteriorating as well, turning into smoke. So Soul thought the mom was hurting the girls, so he reacted correctly. He took out his lightsaber and stabbed her right in the middle, and with this, she dies. After he stabs her, Mother Anastasia says, "I was going to let her go with you." But why wouldn't she start with that? And second, why did she turn to the smoke monster in the beginning? It doesn't make sense. When she turns into the smoke monster, first of all, it looks evil. Second of all, it looks like she's doing something to the little girl, like attacking her. Of course the Jedi is going to react. They're there to save the girls. They think they're in danger. So if something's happening to the girl, he reacts instantly, and she dies. So at episode 8, when May tells Osha that Soul killed the mother. So all Soul had to do was explain what happened. Instead, he doesn't, and think about this for a second. Osha changes sides to the Sith because Soul killed the mother. Soul was a father figure to Osha for many, many years since she was a little girl until she left the Jedis. It doesn't make sense. All she had to do was talk to Soul. Like, they've known each other. They've been close. All they had to do was talk it out. But this show, they don't do a lot of that. They leave things out to get the plot going. And what happens is Osha, she gets angry and starts force choking Soul. And he dies. And they kill him the most pathetic way too. And you would think because he's a Jedi Master that he can block the Force, but besides that, as he's dying, he says, I always loved you, or I loved you, or something. And he died in the most pathetic way. And at this point, my mind was blown because looking back, Soul was the victim of the show. He was the only good actor, first of all. Second of all, his character was the only character that did what he was supposed to do. He reacted correctly by killing the mom. He tried to save the girls. At the end, he tries to kill the Sith, and he tries to get May, because May killed a bunch of Jedi Masters. Keep in mind, these Jedis, too, were friends of Osha's for many years. They were her friends. Remember Jecki? She was like her best friend, and she was killed by the Sith. And yet again, at the end of the show, she joins a psychopath, which makes her a psychopath. At the end of the show, it shows them holding hands with a lightsaber, and it's the most cringy thing I've ever seen. And it doesn't make sense. Throughout the whole show, the writing was so poor, like I said, it feels like a parody of Star Wars. Ultimately, The Acolyte is a masterclass on how to not make or write a show. The poor writing, the poor acting, the poor character development, and the whole direction of the show was honestly so bad. It absolutely blows my mind that such a high-budget show can turn out so poorly. And even if the plot was bad, maybe the acting would be good, but it wasn't. Acting was honestly so bad. And right now, there's a lot of people, for whatever reason, they are trying to get a season 2 of this absolute horrible show. And I don't care who you are. If we watched the same Acolyte, it was horrible. The plot didn't make sense. The characters were so unlikable. And towards the end of the show, you couldn't tell who was the main character because the characters were constantly changing from the protagonist to the antagonist, back and forth. Osha, back and forth, back and forth. And in the end, they blame everything on Soul. At the end of episode 8, the Jedi are going to lie about this whole situation, about these dead Jedi, about the Sith and everything, and they're going to blame it on the one character, like I said, who was the good guy in all of this, Soul. They're tarnishing his name, and they're blaming it on him, saying he was like a rogue Jedi and so on. Oh, and I forgot about this too. So right when they killed Master Soul, and it was Osha, May, and the Sith, and they could all escape together, right? Because Osha's going to train with the Sith. But for whatever reason, they decide it's the best idea to wipe May's memory. And this Sith has the power to wipe her memory, conveniently. Why did they wipe her memory? There was absolutely no reason for that. No one was there to capture them and so on. They could have just escaped. But instead, they wipe her memory and they leave her behind. When I watched this, I thought something was going to happen, or I thought they were going to explain why the Sith was wiping her mind. But instead of her going with Osha and the Sith, they leave the train, they leave May behind with white memory. Oh my god, it just doesn't make any sense. This show is an absolute joke. And there were so many more things through this show that didn't make sense. But if I went through every single thing, every single plot hole in this show, it would be a 5-6 hour video. But hope you guys enjoyed this video today. Honestly, I hope there's not a season 2 of The Acolyte. A lot of people are pushing for it for whatever reason, because Leslie Headland is right now begging for a season 2, and honestly, she's done so much damage to the lore of Star Wars, and also with Yoda too. They put Yoda at the end, and they're trying to say that Yoda was a part of this whole conspiracy, and they're trying to ruin his character. It feels like the creators of this show don't like Star Wars. It feels like they only know surface level stuff. If you're a creator of a beloved show that's been around for 40 years, you think you would do your due diligence and look into the lore, read some of the books, and really get a grasp of what this show is. Instead, they made this awful creation of The Acolyte, and I'm praying that there's not a season 2. Alright guys, I'm on the video right here. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a comment down below what you thought of The Acolyte Season 1, and if you think Season 2 is something that should be made. Honestly, I think it shouldn't. The ratings were extremely low. 14% Rotten Tomatoes, and the viewership was the lowest out of any Star Wars project ever. And I do respond back to every single comment I get. Peace out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.